Hey everyone, I'm Elfowls, and welcome to another draft analysis. This one marks our return to the Pokemon All-Star Conference. Last time in PAC, I played in the Side League Season 7, where I won the whole thing. Shoutouts to my team, led by Iron Valiant, Kyurem, and Terra King Gambit. That championship win was enough for me to get an invite to the PAC Main League, so I'll be joining in Season 4. There are 16 very good coaches in this draft, and they will all be uploading their battles as this is an upload required league, so I'm really looking forward to this. As for the draft itself, Pokemon range from a total of 1 to 20 points, and we had 105 points to draft a team of either 10 or 11 Pokemon, with the stipulation that you can only have up to 2 Mons from the 19 to 20 point range, and only a single 1-pointer, with the interest of preventing any super top-heavy drafts. Terra captains are free type, Terra Preview. You're allowed to have 2 captains totaling up to 24 points, with the Terra bands being basically what you'd expect from a standard kind of draft. Most of the top tiers, Regieleki, Volcarona, stuff like that. So with that all out of the way, let's get into the draft because I'm really excited to tell you about this team that I picked up. I was the 11th pick in the draft, firmly in the back half, so I went in expecting to have a lot of my round 1 plans get messed up. That did end up being the case. I really wanted to draft a team around Spectrier, but that went pretty early, obviously. And then I was actually thinking about an early Raging Bolt pickup, but that was also taken in the first half of round 1. So with my first choices taken already, what was left over? This is kind of insane, but up until my number 11 pick, no one had taken it. So my round 1 pick for 20 points is Dragapult. I got the vibe that a lot of these coaches had used Dragapult multiple times already and wanted to try out new things, but hey, I haven't used it yet and I'll gladly take it at this position. I don't think I need to sell you on why Dragapult is good. It's commonly considered one of the best Pokemon allowed in draft, to the point where I would basically be throwing by passing it up this late in the draft order. But if you haven't heard its merits already, Dragapult is one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, with great mixed attacking stats and actually serviceable bulk, a Dragon Ghost typing that has an amazing dual stab combination, along with plenty of coverage, especially on special side, and a bunch of utility between Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave, dual screens, Dragon Dance setup, and the all-important U-turn for pivoting. Dragapult is just about the perfect Pokemon to build a team around. It can fill just about any offensive role. It can be a pivot, late game cleaner, early game utility, or sometimes even a breaker with band or specs. There's a lot you can do in the builder with this guy. That said, Dragapult is mostly filling that fast attacker / pivot role, so it would be great to have some more dedicated breakers to support it. And Dragapult also struggles with fairies, so it would pair up nicely with a good fairy killer. That's why for round 2, I drafted Iron Moth for 16 points. I've used this mon before, and I really liked it. This gives me another fast attacker at base 110 speed, and it is strong at base 140 special attack. This is the special breaker I've been looking for. Slapping on a choice specs is obvious to really melt through opposing walls, but Iron Moth also has plenty of other options. Utility sets can work well with its nice special bulk, along with U-turn for pivoting, Morning Sun for recovery, as well as Toxic Spike setup. Then we also have the setup sets, either with booster energy speed, or fiery dance stacks, or just a power boosting item with agility. So we have a lot of options to work with here. As well, as a complement to Dragapult, this can be the traditional breaker for that cleaner, and Iron Moth also helps to break through those bulky steel and fairy types that Dragapult might struggle with. And Dragapult can also help Iron Moth, putting pressure on the bulky psychic types like Glowking that would otherwise check it. I think it's going to be a great pairing. And finally, Iron Moth is legal to Terra in this draft, and you bet I'm going to make it my first Terra captain. Terra gives Iron Moth the coverage it needs to break through bulky pieces that would otherwise beat it, and helps to mix up its typing to take advantage of its special bulk. All of a sudden, with Terra, Iron Moth is an amazing standalone attacker that can't be stopped by anything but the bulkiest of special walls. Speaking of which, let's break through those special walls. For my third pick, I got Urshifu Rapid Strike for 15 points. Now this is the physical breaker that we need. Base 130 attack is impressive on top of some high base power stab moves and set up with Swords Dance, Bulk Up, and Trailblaze. Base 97 speed and good physical bulk helps to round out the stats on my 3 top tiers, and U-turn makes this the 3rd offensive pivot out of my 3 picks. I really believe in drafting a big top 3 that are going to make up the core of your offensive game plan, and I really love the core that I got here. Urshifu does compound a fairy weakness with Dragapult, but Iron Moth helps take out any fairy. And any steel type that can't be taken out by Iron Moth will lose to Urshifu, so it's further support for Dragapult. And starting off the draft with 3 pivots, I am a huge fan of that. So the 4th pick, I do need to build up some of a defensive profile. Should probably grab my steel type here, and while I'm at it, I don't have any form of hazard control yet. And what do you know, there's a pick on the board that addresses all those issues. In round 4, I have drafted Corviknight for 14 points. So being honest, historically, I have not liked Corviknight very much. It always just feels like a U-turn button to me, but I have to admit, it did look really good for this team. Like I said, it's my defensive steel and my hazard remover, and as my steel type, it's also a ground immunity, which I didn't have yet, and it's a great defensive pivot to get my offensive picks safely onto the field. The bulk is pretty good. I mean, it's a Corviknight, you know how bulky it is. It's not a pickup that I'm super excited about, but it just provides so much. This team is looking a lot better with its utility and pivoting potential. That's 4 pivots with 4 picks, by the way, so far. So, with those top 4 picks out of the way, I've gone through a decent number of my points already, so I need to start picking mid-tiers or lower from this point on. Looking around, I might as well grab my next Terra Captain, which can be up to 8 points to complement Iron Moth's 16 to add up to 24. There were some good options. Diancie is an 8-pointer, that was pretty tempting, but I saw something that I was a little more excited about. Round 5 here, I grabbed Terra Captain Torterra for 8 points. At the most basic level, Torterra can be a nice physically defensive ground type that can set Stealth Rocks for the team, and it also fills the role of my grass type to flesh out the Fire Water Grass core. But of course, the X factor this offers is Shell Smash, turning it into a very powerful breaker or sweeper with 1 turn of setup. With Terra to help out, Torterra can get an easy extra turn to set up, or on defensive sets it can be a good wall with whatever defensive profile I want. And regardless, getting extra power or coverage on sweeping or bulky attacker sets is great. I've gone on record saying that I don't love using Shell Smash, but Torterra is a very powerful user of it, and I think even when I'm not using it for Shell Smash, the threat of that setup warps the way my opponent has to play, and Torterra has plenty of other things it can do in the meantime. I really like Torterra, so I hope it can do well this season. Rounding out the top 6 here, I wanted another early game utility piece, so I picked up Mesprit for 9 points. I think Mesprit has been seeing a kind of surge in usage recently in draft, and after taking a look, I totally get it. This is a really nice value pick that gives me a lot to work with. We have yet another U-turn pivot, a second rocker, knockoff, and decent setup between Nasty Plot and Calm Mind, coming off a pretty nice stat spread. Mesprit isn't the best Psychic type out there, but for its point value, it definitely does the job. I've used this before, and there's a ton of potential. Scarf and Spec sets are surprisingly powerful with great coverage, and the utility sets have endless possibilities. Healing Wish is a big move for Mesprit, and Encore is another one. I always love having an Encore user on my team. That's a great check to bulky setup. So yeah, Mesprit can fill a lot of different roles. So here we have the top 6. The 6 Pokemon that I would expect to make up the core of my team. It's looking pretty good. We have a lot of speed and power, a whole bunch of pivoting, and some decent hazard play already. Typing wise, it's looking alright, although I have yet to draft a Ghost Resist, and I do have 2 weaknesses. So with the remaining picks, I'm just looking to plug some holes, so I'm going into the back half of the draft with some specific roles in mind for the low tiers. I want a secondary hazard remover, a decently bulky dark type, 1 more fast Pokemon, and an electric type. And immediately I see 1 pick that covers 2 of those bases. In round 7, I picked up Chinchino for 6 points. And I feel like this is pretty underpriced for Chinchino. I would have viewed it as about this good in Gen 8, and since then it's gained access to Tidy Up, which fills out that hazard removal role, as well as being a crazy setup move. Chinchino also has that base 115 speed stat, which is the bump in speed tiers that I wanted right past Iron Moth. Strong attacker too. The raw attack stat isn't anything crazy, but Chinchino's high base power moves on account of either Technician or Skilling are really where the power comes from. One thing about this pick is that the counterplay can overlap with Urshifu. People can just bring Rocky Helmets for those multi-hit moves, but at the very least Chinchino does have knockoff to bait out Helmets and take them out for Urshifu, so I actually kind of like the pairing. This should be a good backup fast attacker for my team. Then in round 8, like I said, I wanted to find a decent dark type, and I ended up going with Bisharp for 6 points. This is another pick that I can't believe went for this cheap. Bisharp's stats just feel a little too good for this price point, with 125 base attack and honestly really solid defenses after Eviolite. That's the main appeal behind this pick. Eviolite makes this a bulky attacker that can tank hits for the team while dealing back big damage, with Swords Dance and Sucker Punch being the notable standouts on its sets. As my Dark type, it's going to be a nice sturdy Ghost and Dark resist, and I really like it as a secondary Steel type. Bisharp tends not to feel like a true Steel, but it lacks that Fairy resist, but that's okay, I already have Corviknight for that role. Okay, last major role I'm looking for is a solid Electric type. Mostly because I'm a little worried about my matchup in the flying types. I'd like something that can threaten good damage onto them. So after looking through the options, I landed on Lantern for 7 points in round 9. And I do think that 7 points is just a little expensive for Lantern. I don't think it's better overall than either Cinccino or Bisharp, who both went for 6. But I think it's a good enough fit for my team that it's worth the points here. What I like the most about it is Volt Absorb for that electric immunity, since my other electric immunity in Torterra might be terastallizing out of its ground typing. Other than that, Lantern is another bulky pivot with a pretty good defensive typing, Volt Switch, and good status spreading with Thunderwave and Scald. I've used it before, and I think it's a really solid low tier, great wall and pivot. Okay, we're moving right along. It's round 10, I have 4 points left, and all I'm looking for at this point is a budget pick that can at least be something my opponent has to consider in the team builder. Hazard Stack is actually something I don't really have yet, so looking at the options, ended up going with Carbink for 3 points. And it does what you would expect. It's a defensive Pokemon that can set up rocks and spikes early in the game. That's pretty much it, but at the very least this is a Fairy type with the same defensive stats as Diancie, so there's probably some walling potential there, especially with Body Press as an option to strike back. Mostly though, I see this as a potential hazard lead in matchups where that looks good. Okay, so finally we've hit round 11, and I have 1 point left. Didn't even have to draft 11 Mons, you can have 10. I didn't even expect to get to the 11th pick. Like, I would have drafted Carbink for 4 points, so I'm just kind of looking through the 1-pointers and seeing if I can find any value. There really isn't too much here, but I did end up going with Fletchinder in round 11. This provides 2 small niches for the team. First, a fire flying type with Flame Body, because screw you, Rillaboom. Yeah, Rillaboom was actually drafted alongside Magnezone, so it was an actual motivation for me to draft a secondary Rillaboom answer besides Corviknight. Secondly, Gale Wings does provide some options even off of these low base stats. A one-time priority Brave Bird, Defog, or Tailwind could potentially come in handy in some very specific cases. So that's going to do it for the 11 Pokemon on my draft for PAC Season 4. I really like how it came together. The top 3 look like a really good core. Iron Moth plus Torterra is one of the stronger sets of Terra Captains in this draft in my opinion, and with all this pivoting, there's a ton of room for me to play circles around my opponents. So from here, it's up to me to pilot the team with success. We'll see what I can do with it. These PAC videos are going to be uploaded every Sunday, so next week get ready for my match against, well, what do you know, a familiar face. In week 1, I will be facing off against DJS and the Tentacruel Pirates. That's going to be an exciting one, so join me for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.